Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Recently, America's favorite police department, the LAPD, have been back in the headlines again, so you already know that means it's another scandal. This time, a 10-year department veteran had secretly recorded some of his colleagues allegedly making derogatory and racist comments. Oh, say it ain't so. From the LAPD of all people, I can't believe it. The last time that there was a scandal like this was, well, probably 6 months ago. The white media saying that this is so shocking, but the only thing shocking about it is that it's not. And neither is the near total lack of response by the city's so-called leadership, except to actually back up the thugs in blue on this one. Karen Bass, the first black woman to be the city's mayor, is acting like Ed Bradley did. He was the first black man to be the city's mayor, and he was also mayor when the beating of Rodney King took place, as well as the LA riots that followed. And what did he do about it? He sided with the white power structure because that's who he was depending on for his daily bread. Not to mention that fool was depending on the white power structure to underwrite his bid to be California's first black governor, which of course, as we all know, didn't happen. When you have these Negroes who are basically in business for themselves, they're just a bunch of self-interested social climbers, nobody can call that progress. If these bootlicks were any real threat to the status quo, the white media would have been attacking them morning, noon, and night, telling every lie imaginable about them. The fact that that isn't happening tells you everything you ought to know. So, what's Karen Bass doing about the latest LAPD race scandal? The same thing her predecessors did about the ones before it, and it's no surprise that it's black people who are the main targets of these racist attacks. In one instance, you had a Latino police officer identified as Shirley Burgos who offered a tip on fighting African Americans. Quote, "You hit black people in the liver. I heard they got weak livers," according to the complaint. And this same person allegedly described a fellow Hispanic as a wetback after the janitor complained about her. But this Burgos character was also involved in recruitment for the LAPD, and she often pulled officer candidate profiles to see what they looked like. And apparently she also gave failing evaluations to candidates on the basis of their appearance. Now, does anybody want to ask how many of these people she was racially profiling were black? And in another instance, there was a Hispanic officer who bragged that he called the police on black children for the crime of selling chocolates. As he put it, they didn't belong there. Apparently they were too close to his neighborhood, I guess. This is the black-brown alliance that we keep hearing so much about. Trump is mass deporting these people who come from south of the border, and we have Hispanics saying that we're all in this together, but this is what black people have been dealing with for the longest time. You have Hispanics who are actually heaping hate on each other, just like you had those Hispanic LA City Council members who are attacking black residents. Nuri Martinez, who called a black toddler a monkey and also made disparaging remarks about fellow Hispanics because I guess she felt that they were too dark-skinned for her tastes. This is what we've been talking about when we say you got people who come from countries that practice open anti-black racism. It's their culture, and they bring that racism to the U.S., and this is the end result. And yet, everybody tells us that that isn't happening, or if it is, we shouldn't be saying anything about it. And it's not just the LAPD. Time and again, we've seen across the country, whenever a company has some racist like this as their human resources director, we suddenly find that they're not hiring any more black people, not that they were opening the doors for black people to begin with, but it's been these people who claim, when it suits them, that they're people of color, and yet as soon as they get installed as a human resources director, next thing you know, they're the main ones saying we're not hiring any black people. Oh, and on a side note, where's Ed Blum at? He likes to run around making false accusations about racial discrimination. No surprise he's nowhere to be found when real racial discrimination's going down. Because a number of the people who were caught on these recordings are in the LAPD's recruitment division, which means they're the ones who decide who's allowed to join the LAPD. Now that practice in and of itself is a huge problem. You don't let any group decide something of this nature alone, especially when they have the kind of putrid racist record that the police have. Personnel ought to be handled by an outside and independent group, but most of all, selection for who is in a police department should be made by the community itself. This is not how you create a professional public safety organization. This is how you create a taxpayer-funded street gang. which is what the LAPD and every other so-called law enforcement organization in America are. The police should have zero say over who is hired, because that's been the entire problem. They select their inbred and incompetent family members and friends and their crooked buddies, and they also keep out honest people who won't go along with the corruption. This is the reason that these police departments have these alleged manpower shortages. Oh, we're having problems hiring people. Yeah, it's because they're letting the criminals decide who gets hired. And then the few decent people who do manage to slip through the cracks, they wind up being harassed, maligned, and ultimately run out by the dirty cops. We'll continue with the moment of truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down, or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready, and always carry your steel. Power Tools. Because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. Trash like this Burgos woman falsely claim, oh, we just can't find people who want to be in the police departments. No, what they mean is we can't find people who are as dirty as we are, who are going to protect our corruption. And it's not just in the LAPD. We see this nationwide. This has been the police's response to the uprisings of 2020. They're trying to do some little half-brained attempt to hold the line for the rest of their crooked pals. This incident has laid bare what we've already known, which is there is no black leadership, period, in the City of Angels. Your mayor is silent, and on top of that, it turned out you had some black officer who was here talking about how this is going to be in the LA Times. Yeah, but he wasn't the one who blew the whistle on this. That's a problem. All these idiots trying to climb the ladder. And what is the response from the leadership of the city now that this scandal has broken open? The LAPD is investigating the allegations, they say, and they've launched a probe into how the officers' alleged comments and actions may have affected the department's recruitment efforts. Never mind the fact that these racist practices have been going on for decades, but they also made one other announcement. LAPD officials said that they're going to investigate whether this whistleblower officer's recordings were made illegally. Oh yeah, you already know that they were going to be doing that one. Because you see, California is a two-party consent state. So these kind of recordings, which are crucial and important for the public to be informed of who the dirty cops are, as far as they're concerned, well, this is the kind of thing we don't want getting out there. This has nothing to do with protecting the public and everything to do with these corrupt officials protecting themselves. And you also know that this is an organized offense by the city's political leadership because you don't have anyone in the mayor's office or the DA's office or anywhere else saying that the police have no expectation of privacy when they are on the job in public talking to their colleagues, admitting to all sorts of criminality like racial profiling while they're in uniform. What expectation of privacy does anyone have under those circumstances? None. Every single one of the individuals who were caught on those recordings making these racist statements, admitting to their racial profiling and all the rest of it, every single case that they've ever touched should be thrown out. That goes without saying. That's the kind of thing that doesn't even need to be mentioned. Not only should they be fired, but every single case that any of these pieces of garbage have ever touched needs to be reviewed. If it led to any sort of conviction or someone doing jail time, it should be overturned. You have to start from scratch. That's the message that ought to be coming from the city's political leadership, but of course, it's not. Nobody is telling the police, when you put on that uniform, you're not off duty under any circumstances. And nobody telling them, if you want to run around with a badge and a gun, you got to also accept extraordinary scrutiny as well. Or in their case, you have to accept scrutiny, period. This is who the Democrat enclave of Los Angeles is trying to insulate itself against, the people who are exposing the criminality there. Keep this in mind the next time you have somebody on cable news or their online leftist mouthpieces who go into hysterics about Trump and the MAGA crowd using their political positions to threaten and intimidate people. You got Democrats in California who are doing the exact same thing. How the hell are these guys going to be fighting against the MAGA crowd, misusing government office in order to intimidate and harm people who are merely blowing the whistle, when Democrats are doing the exact same thing in California and they're not bothered at all? And it's not just California. They also do it in New York, they do it in Chicago, they do it in Boston, and they do it in DC and everywhere else. Where's the concern from Democrats about a police state now? Where's the Democrats' concerns about whistleblower protections? Where are any of the Democrat politicians who are going to be dropping subtle hints that any attempts that are made to retaliate or otherwise inflict some sort of reprisal against the whistleblower will wind up with those police officials themselves losing their jobs? Drop the hints that if anybody tries to stop people from blowing the whistle, you yourself will be the one who's kicked out. What politicians out there are demanding that no action be taken against this conscientious officer who made all this public? This is for the vote blue no matter who crowd. Gavin Newsom's busy making nice with career racists like Charlie Kirk. Gavin Newsom's the governor of California, and this is what he's doing. Why isn't he proposing a statewide police accountability commission like the kind proposed by Biden back in 2020? And yeah, we know that it's an empty proposal, but still. In the People's Republic of Florida, you got moron DeSantis, who's actually proposing a statewide Department of Government Efficiency, never mind the fact that the Republicans have been in charge of California for the last 30 years. So any sort of programs he's going to cut are going to be the very ones that his Republican buddies put in place so they can line their own pockets. But Democrats ought to be the ones who also lead the charge to institute their own statewide versions of policies that don't make it into federal law. There's an old saying that in America, the states are supposed to be incubators for federal law, but truth be told, more often than not, it actually is the reverse. The federal government's the incubator where they propose ideas, and if they can't get it past Congress, then you'll have a number of the red states who try to use their ability to pass laws to basically create a de facto federal statute. Because when 3/5 of the states in the U.S. pass similar legislation, in all but name, that might as well be a nationwide law. That's what the Republicans have been doing. Not a single blue state governor or even one blue city mayor has supported giving citizens review boards any real power to punish the police. You should have citizen review boards who have the power to hire and fire. You should have citizens deeply involved with this process. Now, that alone would take a lot of power out of the police's hands. It would also make it where these little racists running around these police departments wouldn't have the ability to arbitrarily decide who they want. They would have no power whatsoever, and that's how it should be. And yet you'll have these same Democrats who will actually have the nerve to take the side of the white right, and they'll be attacking us for saying that all these cops are racist. They'll be telling us that we're unfairly stereotyping the police. No, that's not stereotyping. That's pattern recognition. The only problem is that we don't have the ability under law to punish these creeps for their criminality. When Gavin Newsom has been catering to trash like Elon Musk and using the governor's office to derail our reparations, this is the class and caliber of garbage that he's supporting. This is why as black people, we are not about to allow any of these Democrat shills to call themselves telling us that the Democrats are on our side. They don't do anything for us, but they support everybody who is against us. You can't clean up the city unless you also declare that you're going to clean up all these racist, corrupt cops too. And clean them up means put them in the nearest jail cell. But then again, dirty cops also protect dirty politicians and dirty businessmen. Remember Mo Lester Moonves, the disgraced former head of CBS? He had an LAPD captain as his personal bodyguard, and that police captain wrote a sloppy, wet kiss of a love letter to Moonves in which he said that Moonves had his allegiance. He actually said that. He said that he gave his allegiance not to the citizens of Los Angeles or even to the police brass, but to a degenerate network executive who had been accused of rape and other acts of sexual assault. One has to wonder how many of these politicians out there that Moonves has given political contributions to. And he's not alone, of course. The reason that the most so-called liberal state in America is so racist is because this is how they want it. And the reason your black politicians out there never seem to get a full head of steam about fighting it is because they feel like they've escaped blackness. They use their black constituents, who are their neighbors in many cases, as nothing more than a stepping stone, a voting bloc who they ignore when it's election season, and they only mention black whenever they're in front of black audiences, but the rest of the time they're making it clear, oh, we're doing the colorblind thing. Yeah. It's a lot easier to ignore anti-black racism when you decide that you're not going to be looking at black people at all. In the meanwhile, the thugs in blue out in LA, they can go ahead and take a bow. And speaking of blue, those blue state Democrats, they can go ahead and take a bow right alongside them. Once again, they're reminding everyone that when these people say serve and protect, what they're talking about is serving their own self-interest and protecting white supremacy. Good day. And be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. William Ross, Joe Bobo, Melvina Miles, Jacques Hargett, and Rebellious Zoe. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.